Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Drop the Mic. I am Darren Jenkins, your host, and on today's show, to be honest, I never I remember watching the daytime Emmys. I saw you up on stage. Never thought that this person would be sitting opposite me on the screen. Gabriel Gornell. Let me just read your bio real quick. Gabriel Gornell is an award-winning branding, production, and distribution executive for the music and entertainment industries. He specializes in strategic initiatives for artists and filmed entertainment properties that reach audiences via multi-tiered holistic distribution systems. One of his current—
That's a mouthful, huh?
a little bit.
I think hearing that back, I think step number one might be rewriting my bio. Even I don't even know what that means.
Well, let's get it. So it's funny because you said entertainment architect. I've never heard that term before, but I think it's a perfect title for what you've done.
Well, thank you. It's funny that that's what you latched onto. And I think that is actually, in terms of the entertainment industry and in terms of people that are either a part of entertainment or production, or, people coming up, maybe, the younger generation that's interested in this, be it film or television or streaming, one of the funniest things about this business is, what does a producer do? I mean, I can't tell you how many times coming up in this business that question's been asked. Everyone knows what a director does, right? And everybody knows what a casting agent does. Everybody knows what a cinematographer does.
Right.
Tell me again, what does a producer do? I mean, I just feel like it's very often it's like, oh, are you the guy that writes the checks, or are you the one that rents the cameras, and sure, there are certainly producers out there whose only contribution is finding the money. In fact, let's be honest, that in entertainment, that's an important part, right?
Yeah.
But and then there's people that take that producer credit who are just really, really great at the logistics and the rentals and the, that side of it, renting cameras,
Right.
And because there's such a range of jobs that have to get done, that all get bucketed under that one title producer, that nobody knows what the producer actually does. I think there's actually, I want to get into that. I don't want to leave too far, but the issue with regard to the producer title actually goes back to old Hollywood. Right. And, in old Hollywood, in the studio systems, the way that it worked was, you had all these day players that unionized. Right. And so the directors had a union. And when you have a union, you have a clearly defined job description. And this goes from all the crew positions. And during the early days of Hollywood, in the studio system days, the producers worked for the studios, right? They were like the staff executives. And so why does management need a union? And so when all the other crew departments got their union job descriptions, since the producers were actually the employees of the studios and were considered management, they never got a defined job description. And even that goes back to why people don't know what a producer actually does, right? And so you take that sort of like old Hollywood studio system lack of job descriptions, take that all the way through to today, and a producer could do. Listen, even actors now, if lending their name, if an actor lends their name to a project and it helps sell the distribution, or it helps sell the financing, or it helps sell, another actor to sign on board, or helps sell, a noteworthy director to come on board, they say, well, you know what, I'll do that if you give me the producer title as well, and so there are so many different roles, and that's essential too.
Right.
I'm happy to share a producer title with an actor if they're bringing that weight. I have no issues with it at all. I think it's an essential part of packaging. But that that's why very often the producer title is confused. And that's why I decided to go with entertainment architect, because what I do for a living is, is about trying to come up with a vision, an idea for either a show
Right.
or an event or a series. And like, a traditional architect, it's all about the planning and the strategy and
Mm,
finding this component to bring in or finding this component to come in, developing a distribution plan that is a part that is a part of the story itself. Finding the team and building it like a house.
right.
And so, it's like if I just on my LinkedIn or wherever or on my bio, if I just said producer or executive producer, I always feel like, well, what does that mean? And so
Mm,
entertainment architect was what I thought was like the most sort of telegraphic thing, to sort of describe, like, all right, whether you're an artist or you're a network exec or you're wherever, so a writer, and why do you call someone like me?
right.
And I think the reason is, listen, there's if you're looking for someone to help you rent a camera, there's much more proficient producers than
Right.
me at that.
Right.
You'd be wasting your time sending me to the camera house. I think that you call someone like me if you're looking for that level of strategy and planning and putting it all together,
Right.
building it brick by brick into a cohesive sort of holistic thing.
Right.
So
You know, uh, I may have to steal that title because I do. I'm
it's yours.
some. I often struggle, like, sometimes I'm on different meetings and stuff, and people will ask me what do I do,
Mhm.
and it's very hard for me to describe what I do because I do so many things for a production, for a project, and that perfectly describes this built, like, built. I'm not, like you said, I am not the dude that's going to get you a great deal on cameras either.
Mhm.
But if you are struggling with an idea and how to achieve it, and within a scope of maybe a budget or maybe a location, or I feel that's a guy that you know I want to have on my team.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm hoping people adopt this because I think it's so much more strategically correct than producer.
I
And
agree, man. It's like, there is such a thing as production strategy,
right,
and ultimately, as the distribution platforms continue to change, especially over the last year, the COVID year alone has dramatically changed
um,
the distribution landscape. It's had an effect on production logistics. There are elements of what we called a year ago COVID compliance in terms of, shooting regimens that are going to live on
right,
long after everyone's vaccinated and safe.
right,
The last year alone has had such a lasting impact on production and distribution, that I think that it's undeniable in a sense with regard to what is the production strategy.
mm,
It used to be, okay, here's the approved idea, or here's the script, here's the talent, here's the budget, go.
right,
Now it's like it's not just the the what and the how.
right,
It's You also have to ask the why,
right,
and I think that, so often, we've got, tail wagging the dog situations with regard to production approaches, that, key decisions get made because that's how things used to be done versus why are we approaching it that way? I
Right.
think that the Grammys production from a few weeks ago, which I loved, by the way.
Yeah.
For the most part, I focus on music. That wasn't my show,
Sure.
but I definitely loved that production.
Yep.
And, in terms of, you know, any big award show or, variety experience, you get so used to saying, well, then our giant audience is on this side of the stage and our performers are on the shiny stage itself. And we're going to have these cameras set up so that we can sweep across the audience simply because that's how it's always been done. Now,
Right.
because we had this crazy year, this pandemic year where we couldn't put the audience in the room or
Mm.
for that Grammy production or my Lollapalooza 2020 production or any of the productions in between. I loved what the Grammys did. They put the artists in an intimate environment and
Mm.
had them in the room listening to the performer. I mean, it's like I found it just as engaging watching the artists perform as I did. I found it just as engaging watching Harry Styles listen to the
Yep.
artists performing.
Yep.
It was, and that was like a COVID compliant solution,
Mm.
right? But at the end of the day, I now, when I think about concepts and packaging, I much prefer that intimate
Yeah.
reaction. I don't need to see 20,000 people sitting there in an audience like cattle. Like, who cares? That's not
Right.
what I'm. If I was in the room, maybe the goosebumps, the
Huh.
excitement, the tribal experience, but like from television, I like the intimacy.
Yeah.
And so that kind of stuff, that kind of, a COVID takeaway, a pandemic takeaway, right?
Mm.
That's going to impact production strategies moving forward. And, I mentioned, it's used to be all about the what or the how. Now we have to ask why.
Yep.
Why do we have those sweeping audience shots if I'm sitting on my couch? Who gives a shit? Like
Nobody cares, right?
I think that very often, is it moving the story forward? Is
Mm.
it like why? And
Yeah. Question.
very often it's like, well, I need 18 cameras. Why? Like eh,
Mm.
I think that ultimately this last year in particular,
Right.
it's had such a huge impact on obviously production approaches, that will last beyond the pandemic.
Right.
But, every artist, embracing their own live stream, their own ticketed live stream,
Yeah.
you know, OTT solutions in terms of distribution, it wasn't invented during COVID. I mean, obviously, and when I use an expression like OTT, I'm specifically referring to IPTV, like internet
Yeah.
provided
Yep.
distribution over the web, right? Versus like VOD through a smart TV or something like that.
Right.
But like IPTV side of it, was obviously around before the pandemic, but it exploded over
Mm.
the last 12 months because no artists could be on the road,
Mm.
but now in the last year, it was embraced by the fans too.
Right.
And that sort of like, it's like, you know, people at home, it's like you have, your regular television, you have your premiums, whether it be your HBOs or, your stars or your showtimes. And then you have your streaming premiums, your Netflix, your Amazon. Um, and now I think with the, you know, really high profile artists embracing OTT, direct to fan, ticketed, IPTV, what have you, I think that it's become the norm. And I think that that ability to sort of quote unquote self distribute direct to your fan ain't
Mm.
going away,
Mm.
and so how does that fit into your distribution strategies moving ahead? Whereas, gosh, I mean, I sadly read obviously that some big theater chains might not make it through.
Right.
Does that mean that your first window theatrical run might be the direct to fan ticketed experience instead of
Mm.
the theatrical experience? And if that's the case, your second window, you know, is maybe that stays the same, or maybe it's cable and it bypasses the premium streamers,
Right.
but all of these things become part of your distro strategy, and your distro strategy does inform your production strategy on many levels.
Right.
And, it's just like, I mean, super exciting that we have a chance to sort of reinvent here a little bit.
Yeah, 2020 definitely was, a challenging time for all content creators of the live variety.
Hmm.
And but to your point, I feel like it's kind of an exciting time also too, because it's it's forcing people to be more creative in how they reach their audience.
Hmm.
It's also kind of like curating your audience as well in a lot of ways, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because for the most part, the most passionate of fans, they don't care whether it's live or on their computer. They just want to be able to have that experience with you. And it seems to be the way, a lot of these artists are starting to use the platforms,
Hmm. Hmm.
a much more personal experience.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. And I think you nailed it. I think that the word you chose, a more personal experience, I think honestly, that's what we're longing for right now.
Hmm.
You know, we we got so sterile and removed with, or at least our event style
Right,
television.
right, right.
Okay. Um, it definitely got, I make fun of shiny floor specials all the time, just because I feel like where's the intimacy? Where's that sort of emotional connection,
Mhm.
and the pendulum always swings. But so it's like, whether it be these sort of game show style music productions for TV, right? The shiny floor productions, the artist is removed from the judges, who's further removed from an audience, and everything is just spectacle over emotion.
Right,
And then all of a sudden, and the pendulum's going far in that direction, right? And then all of a sudden we have a year like we've had,
right.
where we're all just longing for intimacy. We're all longing to accidentally rub up to somebody and actually, elbow to elbow in a live venue and feel another human. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And now I think, because we've had a year, I mean, walking around with, separated by a mask. I'm a fan of masks, don't get me wrong, but
Yep.
still it's a separation in terms of human connection. And now I think we just so badly want to connect again, that, listen, you heard me reference the Grammy production, which wasn't mine, but I
Right,
loved it because it felt intimate.
right.
It felt like, you know, just we want warmth again.
Mhm.
We need to. We've had a heck of a year.
Yeah,
We've listen. We've had a heck of a 4 years. Let's be
yeah,
honest.
yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
but when you come off of sort of an experience like we've all had. Now we know what the last year of this was, right?
Mm,
Lockdown, masks, no interaction, right?
right,
And then the 3 years before that, okay. Um, I think we had our last president win the election, which basically kicked us into the women's march movement,
right,
right? Which kicked just fighting for equality, right?
right.
And that was gender equality. That was, I think, the first, coming together to stand up for what's right after the last. I'm not going to say his name out loud. Not going to
Mm,
give him that.
okay.
Last president kicked off gender equality, at least in media, via the women's marches.
Right,
That rolled into the Me Too movement, gender equality, to like, just, sexual harassment. It like,
right. Yeah,
I mean, then obviously it didn't take long before it was like racial disparagement at our borders,
right,
right? To the BLM awareness and movement,
Mm.
to, oh my gosh, it's like, now we're be, 4 years ago, I had never even known, like the expression, black and brown skinned communities, right?
Right.
I mean, easy for a white guy to say, you know what I mean? But it's like at the same time, it took those 4 years for me to even know the expression and brown skin communities. I didn't,
Right.
you know, and then all of a sudden, it's like now because of our previous Cheeto in chief, using expressions like the kung flu.
Right.
Now I dumb white guy, I didn't even know that there was issues with regard to accepting and embracing people of, Asian communities,
Right.
right? Like, so we're like, this is, and then on top
Mm.
of all that, we got this little thing called the pandemic, right? And so it's like we've just been going through it. We've been going through it. And so what does that mean, right? In terms of I obviously, get a little passionate about the social topics, as you could tell, right? But like that has an impact on what we're talking about.
Sure.
That has an impact on how people, decide what they're going to watch, how they're going to find their own escapism, how they're going to, just laugh at the end of a
Hmm.
hard day, turning something on that might make them feel good, or possibly, imagine this, bring the family together at the end of the day.
Mm.
And when you come off of 4 years of this experience, and then you keep for the final year of it, everyone's like, put this on your face and stay at home and don't interact, and you can't see a live show, and
Yeah.
you can't go out to dinner, you can't see your grandparents, kids have to go, no prom. My daughter, 18
Yeah.
years old, prom canceled. You know what I mean? It's like, talk about the worst senior year that you're working towards your whole life.
Yeah.
So so you want to have a sterile music special with no intimacy, or do you want to touch again? Or do you want
Right.
to like feel something,
Right.
you know? So I
Yeah.
think I think that, pendulum swings regardless, just in terms of societal, cultural wants, needs, what they get tired of, what's new.
Right.
But pendulum also swings when you've like literally need a different kind of experience, and
Mm.
you need to feel good again, and you need to feel love again, and
Mm.
you need to come together again. And I think that we're going to see that, more and more in terms of, the kind of, I mean, the kind of stuff I do is so unimportant compared to the stuff we've just been chatting about for 5 minutes, obviously. But what we do as producers or entertainment architects, or however we want to label ourselves, what we do is reflective
Right.
of those societal trends. What we do is reflective of what culture actually needs or wants or what have you, And so I think it does matter. I think everything is connected. So,
Can I ask you, like, I was always curious about actually. So, you have all these big events, whether it's the Grammys or Emmys or whatever
uh-huh.
shows, these bigger shows,
Yeah.
and then, um, you know, like you said, we've been kind of hit by wave after wave of different social injustice, or message oriented experience, content,
Hmm.
like, and I'm just curious, like, how does, like, so when you're putting a show together,
Hmm.
how do you, how do you approach the decision making behind, what kind of representation based for that, so for Black Lives Matter, or Asian lives, stop Asian hate, and
Hmm.
how do you balance out or have make the decisions when it comes to, how you're creating this event, or or show, and where the messages need to be addressed?
I don't know if there's an easy answer for
I
that
didn't
one.
think so.
Yeah, but that's the right question, I think. I
Mm,
think you're asking the right question,
mm,
and I think that is the question that every producer needs to ask.
mm,
And you phrased it. I heard you loud and clear.
right,
The what I the question that I ask in my shows is, what is the purpose
right.
in
Okay.
this show,
Mm,
right? And in terms of a TV show can't accomplish everything.
right.
Okay. An award show can't accomplish everything. So, my belief personally is we ask ourselves, what is the purpose?
Mm,
And we try to get aligned behind a singular mission that's connected to the show itself. Okay. Now it's only half of your question, and I get that,
right,
but at least in terms of if there's a charitable component,
right.
if there's a message, if we're trying to have some kind of social relevance, what naturally connects to the show?
Mhm,
Okay. So, in terms of, this is, I'm working on right now. Um, I'm working on developing uh, a celebration and acknowledgement of Amy Winehouse's contributions to music and culture.
right.
And as you may or may not know, this July is 10 years since we lost her.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. It's hard to believe it's 10 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when we ask ourselves that question, what is the purpose?
Mm,
Okay. For this one, we want to absolutely, we've identified it is as, getting behind mental health awareness. Okay.
right,
That's broad strokes.
right.
There is a natural connection to the show. It is a hugely important topic that we need to come together, raise awareness so we can work together to help. And specifically in the music community, just too many artists suffer from mental health related challenges.
Sure.
And so that's the purpose, right? And so listen, there's so many hugely important things that
Mhm,
need to be tackled, right? But I think that I personally believe that we're more effective if we identify a concise mission and put efforts towards that and have that mission have a natural connection to the show itself or the topic itself, and that's part of it. What is the purpose? But the
mm,
other part of your question, I think, was, just across the board, how do we make sure that we're, more representative of whether it be the US population or the world population with
mm,
regard to who we represent on stage?
mm,
How are we better representative from a gender standpoint? Whereas if broad strokes, there's about equal men and women on the planet,
mhm.
are we having about equal men and women on the stage too then? Kind of
Right.
logical, even though at lots of major music events and headline festival bookings, you
Mm,
don't see that. It's like, well, if half the people in this city are women, why are all of the headliners males?
right.
Like I think that you have to sort of just make earnest decision or
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just try to be a good person maybe,
yeah.
right? And you know we can't I can't expect a younger producer, male, female, white, black, human. I can't expect a young human producer to necessarily know all the questions to ask or what all the measuring sticks should be if I, as an older producer, haven't set a precedence.
Right.
It's like just maybe start by, okay, am I being a good person? That's a good maybe starting point.
Yeah.
But like we have to work into our systems, like the older folks like me have to work into our systems, you know, well, is it gender equality is a good example because it's like because it should be 50-50, like
Sure.
men and women, right?
Yeah.
Um, is our crew representative of that?
Right.
That's the crew behind the camera. In front of the camera
Right.
is the talent and the people that we're representing, or the crowd that we're moving. Is it representative of that? And I think that, listen, there's smarter people than me that can explain why we need to push boundaries in order to be noticed to help something become the norm. And maybe you go overboard a little bit with regard to representation. So a group or a culture can be visible so it becomes accepted faster. I get that kind of thinking, and I support it. Um for me, my go-to is like, does this look like our country, or does this look like the city
Mm.
we happen to be in? Or the country that we happen to be in. There are smart people out there that can sort of, culturists, and there are smart people that can really say, well, listen, if we want, racial equality,
Right.
right, we need to maybe make an effort to make sure uh, a particular culture or group is even more represented than the sort of national average or city average or wherever we are, just so that we make it, like, get it into everybody's heads that these people are just a loved part of our
Right.
community too, whichever group and whichever culture, group, gender we're talking about,
Right. Right.
I don't know, man. What do you think on that front?
I think it's like you said, a very complicated. So when I do events,
Hmm.
like say, a few years ago, I did a panel at with Samsung on VR, and um, the panel was mostly men. Um, I mean, they were mixed in whatever race, and again, I, when I'm creating an event, I probably think about what's who can I put in front of the audience that's going to be of the most value
Hmm.
first,
To
and
who? Most value to who?
to the audience,
To the audience.
I think, because I think that if they're paying to come to an event, then I owe it to them to give them the best content I can give them. Now, um, the VR industry's young,
Hmm.
and at that point in time, was this would have been 2017, I think. It was
Okay.
kind of just starting to kick up. So a lot of the names from the women VR people I was not familiar with, but
Okay.
um, you know, I think it's important to have a diverse conversation,
Hmm.
regardless of what the conversation happens to be, and
Hmm.
what idea of diverse could be different. It could
Hmm.
be, five, like you said, 5 men, 5 women. It could be um, 4 black guys, 4 white guys.
Yeah.
It could be. So I just think that the effort for when you're create when you're when to me is just like you said, be a good person, try to put the effort in to care about what you're trying, what it is you're producing. And I think
Yeah.
that start is a good place to be, because if you
Hmm.
think from that standpoint, I think most times you will go the right direction.
Yeah. I
um,
agree with you.
yeah.
I agree with you. I see we have some
Yes.
questions that have popped up. Should we read some of these out loud, maybe?
Yeah, so let's read Daryl Sledge. Hey Daryl, how's it going? um He writes, I have produced some really cool shows at the Cutting Room. Oh, how come I didn't know about this, man? Um,
32nd Street. That's New York City.
yeah, I have footage of my products produced at this cool joint. I have
Mhm.
been successful. Any advice to take it up a notch? Hmm.
Well, I mean, you're starting at a cool venue, so
Yeah,
that's
it is
that's
nice.
a, that's a good start. You know, take it up a notch. How really? I think
Yeah.
that cool room, great.
Okay.
The room is one of the characters in your story. So, I
Right.
mean, I think that that is, um, important to have the right setting. Obviously, the easiest thing to say, to go to next is the artist that's performing. You
Mm.
know, I mean, listen, I'm a fan of emerging artists, artists that I think are like on the cusp or like about to break. I love that emerging artist scene, getting to see that artist that a year
Mm.
from now might be like, whoa, crazy. But now it's just like at that moment when you feel that energy of it. So I love the emerging artist side of it.
That's the best time.
I also love, the icons. I love the icons.
Mm.
I particularly love seeing an icon in a small room. Like,
Oh, yeah.
that is so special. I would say, listen, you got a cool room. If you're already working out of a cool room, you've checked that box. I think that it comes down to curation next. But not knowing exactly your role that you're playing there in terms of taking it up a notch, why not take it up a notch by if you're booking the room and it's your relationship, super. But if you're not booking the room and it's not your relationship, see about building that relationship with the artist. And because, if you can build the direct relationship with that artist that you happen to be shooting, maybe taking it up a notch is a collaboration with the artist to take what you shot and find a second window life for it.
Mm.
Okay. And give back to the artist. Maybe there's a rights reversion where the footage eventually goes back to the artist, even though you shot it, because that might provide you with the win win to allow you the ability to distribute the footage in collaboration with the artist. So
Mm.
I think taking it up a notch may not be changing the room. It may not be changing the artist. It may be how you think about distributing that footage in collaboration with the artist.
Mm.
I think collaborating with the artist to develop a distribution plan together, even if you ultimately agree to fully have the rights revert back to the artist, that's taking it up a notch. So
Mm.
I would love to somehow hear where that goes, because super cool intimate room, great artists performing there. Yeah, man, just collaborate with those artists on the stage and develop a plan to work with those artists to take it to the next level via distribution, supporting the artist, and it's a win-win. It comes back to you too.
Wow. That's awesome. I do. I'm same as you. I love music. Like so, I start my day every day.
Mhm.
Um, listening to music. I don't turn the TV on. I don't do anything else. I work out, then I take a shower and I sit and I pick some music and I just listen to it while I'm, doing emails and trying to get ready for the day. Like,
Mhm.
I absolutely love music, but my biggest thing is I love discovering someone new that I
Mhm.
hadn't heard. Actually, I discovered someone new that is not new, but it's new to me because of you. Actually,
Go
uh,
on.
I was doing some research and looking around at some of your stuff, and I was like, okay, let me check out the Lollapalooza page, and there's a group called the Neighborhood.
Great
I
fan.
They're freaking great. I was just
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I love them. So now they are on my playlist of my favorites playlist to listen to because I just like listening. And actually, there's an artist who actually I manage. His name is Chris Saunders, who has
Uh-huh.
sent us a message. It sent us, did labels, venues have clauses in contract before COVID prohibiting artists from live streaming unilaterally?
Okay. nothing is ever clean cut, right? I mean, certainly some in some cases the answer is yes, in some cases the answer is no. In
Mm.
terms of labels, the label's biggest, roadblock um is usually with regard to taped recordings versus live stream.
Right.
Okay. So if a label is going to take issue with something with regard to clauses and contracts, etc., usually, listen, there are no rules, every deal's different, but usually their issue has less to do with the live
Mm.
stream and more to do with if it's recorded and it's going to be shared as a recorded performance of music afterwards. Because the moment it's a recorded piece of music, it's actually competing with their business, you know,
Mm.
in the sense that if you're going to purchase a concert performance, that is like, the equivalent of the label's DVD or the equivalent, it's a recorded piece of content. Usually that's where the label would have an issue. In
Mm.
terms of the venues, I mean, listen, there's always clauses and there's always deals. Sometimes they have to do with, how far away from the venue, some sort of radius clause. Sometimes usually it has to do with that. A venue's not going to want to necessarily book an artist that they'll hopefully sell tickets, at a venue if the night before there's a free live stream and people aren't
Right.
going to buy a ticket. So, normally it has to do with conflicts and distance from the venue in terms of venues having an issue with live streams. There's usually a way. Here's the thing though, if you can create a win-win situation for the label or from the venue, whether it be, think of it as, marketing for the ticketed event
Right.
as at the venue. Whereas we're going to do 30 days out, we're going to do 3 songs via live stream, and we're going to, drive traffic to the ticketing page. And this is part of our program. And can we get approval and support by doing this? And we're, we want, if it's really the rising tide really does raise all ships, and if it's earnestly conceived as part of the plan, and you know very very often the venue will be excited by that, put you in touch with their marketing person or the socials person, and work with you
Mm.
but just answer, did labels, venues have clauses and contracts before COVID prohibiting artists from live streaming unilaterally? Nothing is across the board like that,
Mm.
but yeah, there are usually clauses prohibiting complete free range, but there's always a solution.
Mm. Um, Ira Mosley. Um, I don't see any jazz in your portfolio. Are you thinking or seeking to enter the area?
I would love to have more of a, you know, an initiative embracing jazz, particularly since I'm working on this Amy Winehouse project, who, at her heart,
Right.
I consider her a jazz singer,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And listen, I've been getting into it lately, and I absolutely, absolutely, I gotta learn more. I gotta learn more for sure. But I find that exciting. I really find that exciting. And you know what, Ira, hit me up. Yes, let's figure something out.
I just actually interviewed a really talented jazz vocalist on one of my other podcasts, Jasmia Horn. And if you haven't heard of her, she's actually Grammy nominated twice. Um,
Nice.
if you haven't heard of her, you should check her out. She's really just quite good, and she's like when it was funny. I didn't discover, but I heard her on Spotify one night. I was just playing a jazz playlist,
Uh-huh.
and it came up. It was like, oh, who is this? And I saw her name, and I was like, I've got to find her. I gotta. And so
Wow.
She was such a nice person. I found her on LinkedIn, and I just reached out, said, "Would you mind being on my podcast?" And she was like more than happy to do it. I was just, you know, that is one
Oh,
thing I
cool.
will say about COVID.
Mhm.
COVID has done something that I don't think a lot of people, I hope people appreciate, which is people have been so much more receptive and open and passionate about connecting with each other
Uh-huh.
during COVID. I think
Desperate for it.
to your
Yeah.
point, because of COVID and they've missed being around people.
Mhm.
And I think that I hope people don't go back to the way things were. I hope people continue to be more passionate about, just being nice and saying yes and connecting with people that they don't know, because you just
Mhm.
never know what's going to happen. You just never know.
Wow. I hear you, man. And I couldn't agree more. From the bad, we can still learn.
Right.
From the bad, we can grow, right? It's like this is terrible, obviously.
Right.
COVID was terrible,
Right.
but that doesn't mean we can't take a learning from it or we can't grow from it.
Right.
I think just openness, connection,
Yep.
willing to listen,
Yep.
maybe maybe some good can come from those learnings. I'm choosing my words carefully. I don't want to say maybe some good can come from COVID. I don't want to
Right.
phrase it
Right.
that way,
Right.
but like maybe some good can come from our learnings.
Right.
You know, Ira, thank you for these. I see sort of as I'm you know chatting away here. I see the comments come through. I would love to hear more about the church and everything else that you've just put out there. So that sounds very cool.
Yeah, Ira's one of our members, and he's very talented, very very skillful. So
Cool.
thanks, Ira, for watching the podcast and submitting that. When you're not working,
Hmm.
because um, like, what
Well,
do
if
you?
you ask my wife, that is not very often.
Okay.
Hi, honey.
She's like, not. She doesn't really do that, no.
Okay, I'm sorry to have
What
interjected.
What do you do? What do you do to unwind? Like, what's.
Um, so I've got my two latest things.
You must be super busy. I
This
know.
is not going to be sound so original, all right? It's like I'm here talking largely about music shows and music production. So I wish I had something a little bit more interesting than having my hobby also be music.
Mm,
But I'm going to be honest, it is kind of like all encompassing. So there's obviously, you know, when I do eventually get to face the other way in the studio, okay, so that is my, it's like I have my 9 to 5 like a business
right,
executive where I'm facing this way
right,
on, never ending business meetings, Zoom fatigue.
right.
And then when I do have that moment of like, pastime, listen, I'm from New York. I like making beats, I like
Yeah, I was
making
gonna ask you
old
about that.
school hip hop beats from vinyl. Like I do not buy sample packs. I like crate dig, find a weird old record, try to find that kick, sample it on my MPC, and just build like an old school hip. I'm from New York. That's what we do, right? And so old school hip hop beats on my MPC
Yeah,
from vinyl. That is my like pure love.
I
So
saw.
that
I was listening to some of your music actually on SoundCloud,
oh
and
boy, that's
dude, wow! I was like, whoa, this is dope. I was like, you had some Cole Porter in there, and I was just like, wow, okay, all right,
oh gosh, it's funny that that stuff pops up. See, that's kind of weird stuff. Like that Cole Porter one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like first off, I am a total gear nerd, okay? And I get so into like weird pieces of gear. I
Mm,
did that one on a 1982 cassette 4-track recorder. Do you remember back in the day, 4 tracks on cassette, right?
yeah,
And like they just kind of just like we had this vinyl resurgence, right?
right,
And I, you know, in the 80s, like that's how we did it. There was no DAWs, there was no like
right.
anything in terms of like digital recording. If you were lucky enough or you had a rich friend, somebody maybe had like a cassette 4-track, right? And my
Mm,
wife found this one from 82 in such good condition because I was like looking and looking and looking, and it was like my Christmas gift. And it was like, so I'm like, get like, it has like natural analog compression, but to a cassette tape, and it's 4 tracks. So it's like, your left
wow,
and right channel on both sides of the tape, like side A and side B.
right.
And I just love that sound. And so like I'm now recording my beats from MPC to old school 4-track.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's my pastime. All right. Uh Not necessarily like a little borderline artsy, I guess. I don't know what it is. It's like a little
Are you
definitely
gonna
eccentric.
are you putting I mean, so because I've heard some of the stuff, I mean, it's pretty good. Like
Well, thank you.
um, I am going to be, I have we have a friend, Signon Tewell, who's a music producer, and I'm going to point him at your channel because
Yeah,
he's going to appreciate this very much
I
so.
it's funny. It's like that stuff is also it's just like, I don't even know. It's like if Brian Eno met, I don't know, the Beastie Boys in 1984 is kind of like, I think,
Yeah,
it's a little eccentric. So I don't think it's for everybody.
it definitely has a an old like 80s Brooklyn hip hop vibe to it, you know.
I take that as like the hugest compliment in the world. So thank you. Thank you. So
So, can you tell me more about the Amy Winehouse project? So it's a multi-layered thing, right? It's not
yeah,
just
so this is it's like this is we're first off, we're on the eve of announcing it. So this is
oh, so
a
don't
little sneak peek reveal right now.
okay,
So more information probably within the week will be properly announced officially. But
gotcha.
I'll say this, um working with creative director and photographer Charles Moriarty, we we shared an exhibit together at South by Southwest
Mm,
in 2019. This is before COVID, right?
right,
There's been, with regard to Amy, I mean, she did so much culturally and musically, and like so many artists who, candle burned out a little too quick.
right,
There's been too much, in my personal opinion, about Amy focusing on the later days.
right,
And at 27, not that late,
right,
but like the later days in terms of her journey and the Saturdays. And look, if I'm watching a superhero movie, my favorite part is the first half hour when they discover their powers.
right,
I like the origin story.
right,
And just thought, with so much coverage of her Saturdays, why don't we put together an exhibit celebrating her rise?
right,
Right. And so Charles, who was friendly with Amy, he just photographed her a lot, working with the label back then, before the release of her first record, before
right,
the release of Frank. Okay. And so she was 19 years old, just hilarious, all smiles, and just like this, like incredible, like personality and energy of talent. And, in the US, most music fans know her from her second record,
right,
but this is on the eve of her first record, Frank. and she was 19, an emerging artist. No one knew at that point she was going to become a global icon. And we
Right.
put together an exhibit in 2019 at South by Southwest. It was an official South by exhibit. And from the middle of the exhibit, we produced 20 emerging artist showcases
Oh, wow.
from artists at the same stage in their career, right? Just artists that we thought are probably maybe on this that's also on the verge of that kind of like explosion.
Right.
And we produced those official South by showcases from the center of the emotional exhibit of Amy at 19, right?
Mm.
And so we put this together and it just worked so well, in the sense of you got that icon within the exhibit looking at tomorrow's emerging artist.
Mm.
And versus doing a tribute that's just karaoke, people only singing covers.
Right.
This was like, no, let's take it a step further. Let's just celebrate the emerging artist in celebration of what Amy gave us, right?
Mm.
And so that is essentially what now it's 10 years, sadly. July 23rd will be 10 years since we lost Amy. And what we're putting together is sort of inspired by that 2019 South by exhibit,
Gotcha.
but just lifting it up again to just a new level of art and appreciation and thanks, and bringing it back to something earlier in our conversation,
Mm.
purpose. And
Purpose.
we're absolutely have identified our purpose, and I'll save that for the
Sure.
more official announcements in the days to come. But we're definitely setting out to move the needle and try to make a difference.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, Amy just just so talented, and that's a fantastic idea to kind of
Mhm,
focus it on the her start and her rise and her where she was a really immense just talent person, and I think that's how, like, when you look at, we just did on me and Chris have another podcast, and we just did the documentary on Tina. And um I think
I
sometimes
loved it. I
it
loved it. Yeah.
such fantastic. I love that doc. And I
Mhm,
think the reason why it was so good is because we got to also see her rise. You
mhm,
know what I mean? It wasn't always about everything that was bad. It was,
mhm,
I got to see stuff that I didn't even know about her. And I think that's what I love about being a have when you're able to tell these kind of stories,
yeah.
not focusing on the negative, but telling the story of their who, like, why people love them, what
Mhm,
made people love them, what made them special, and because like you said, unfortunately sometimes some artists we don't have for a long time, and we should appreciate them while they're still here, and when they're not here, then we should celebrate their lives as it was at the height of their life, not at the low light of their life, because that's not fair to them.
well said.
Not fair. Um, we have Willie Fest says hello.
What's up, Willie Fest? Yo, that's that's going back to my New York days. Uh-huh.
Yeah, Willie Fest. I've been with I've been a supporter of them for a long time. They're great. So
Great festival.
yeah, great festival.
Great festival that is like, just a part of the community. There's the obviously the film side, but it's they really are something special for Williamsburg. So
Mm, 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 mm.
that puts a smile on my face. Oh man. Yo, what's up, Robin?
What given all of the experiences that you've had, what would be some advice you'd give to somebody trying to be the next, or someone who wants to be a entertainment architect? What would be some things like you'd recommend for them to kind of either learn or try to do, or try to knowledge that you might be useful for them?
Well, yeah, advice coming up is, and I get this, I'm asked this quite a bit actually. And, and I go back and forth,
Mm,
honestly. And it's like, coming up in New York, we used to wear like indie film as like a badge of honor.
right,
It
right,
was like, you know, late 80s, 90s. The being a part of the indie film scene was absolutely a creative choice.
right,
It what allowed us to have creative freedom and allowed us to sort of, feel confident in making things that were closer to fine art versus a piece of commerce. And
right.
it wasn't necessarily art by committee. And so I came up in the business just that was everything to me. Being an indie filmmaker or an indie content creator, we didn't call it that then, but
Right,
you know, was absolutely everything to me.
right.
And then when my career took me from New York to Los Angeles, I realized that there's a whole industry out there that doesn't necessarily look at indie film the same way.
Yeah,
And, to the LA entertainment community, right? They so many, not everybody,
right,
but so many people within the network and studio systems they didn't come up in that New York scene, and
right,
they had a perception of it. Indie film means you couldn't get a job at the studio,
right.
and it's like, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah,
Like that's not what it was about. I wasn't. We're not aiming for that.
right,
Like who wants to have a job in the studio when you can make art? Like
right,
what?
right,
Like
right,
you're
right.
and but a lot of the entertainment business is about networking. It
Yes,
it sadly, a good amount of it is who you know versus what you know. That's
yes,
all. That's just a hard fact reality.
yes.
Okay. And so when people ask me for advice, I will circle back to the question. Well, like, what advice do I have? Okay. My advice is sometimes it does matter that you put effort into growing your network,
Mm,
not your TV network, growing your network, your community,
yep,
okay? So that when the time comes and you're ready to be pitching networks, or you're ready to be pitching distributors, or you're ready to be pitching, you know, a commercial project, you have relationships at the places where those decision makers work.
right,
Okay. And it's real easy to, like, we get on our creative high horses where it's all about the, and yes, it does all have to be about the creative. I hope this isn't misinterpreted, but
right,
just as important as that is building your relationship from a young age in the business, so that by the time you're old like me, you do know people that work at the networks, you
right,
do know people that work at the studios. you know it's like, I think that growing your community and growing your network especially in areas of the business that you actually don't directly do for a living,
right.
honestly, my advice is look at that as equally important to your killer script.
Yes,
All right. So if I was just going to leave with one big idea, like somebody coming up today, treat your network and your relationships as important as, yeah, that killer script you're working on.
mm, and I could not agree with you more. I tell people that all the time. It should be stamped on my forehead. I tell people that much, because it they're just. I don't think you can do anything without it. Like
Mhm.
I think trying to do anything without it is just kind of like playing the lottery. Seriously, it's like, to me, it's like every time you add someone to your network, and when I say add, I always tell people to be careful. It's not about numbers. It's not about I need to have 1,000 people. No, 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 no. I tell people it's much more valuable for you to have 100 or 10, but very connected people
Mhm.
than it is for you to have 1,000 people who kind of know you and they kind of heard of you, or they, oh yeah, I kind of am familiar. Make sure you take care of your network. Make sure you
Yeah.
stay in touch with them and don't always contact them when you need something. Just reach out and say, "Hey, how's?" Just reaching out to say how you doing? If there's anything I can help you with, or
Good
whatever.
advice.
But just take care of your network and quality over quantity.
Yeah, man. If you have to, when you're reaching out for something and you need something, if your one of your first two sentences has to be, "Hey, listen, I should be better at keeping in touch," but
Mm,
if that's like one of your first two sentences, you haven't maintained that relationship.
right, right. So I could not agree with you more on that. That is fantastic. Oh, Willie Phil. Oh, that's Robin Adams. Hey, Robin.
Yep, six and all the parties. Oh, geez, that is some memories right there, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't talked to these guys in a long time, but I remember going to a lot of their events. I sponsored a few of their events,
We
and
did back in the day. All right, so this is going back a little bit because it's New
mm,
York, right? We did with Willie Fest the premiere of we we made a hip hop horror movie. We're like trying to create a new genre, right? And um, Michael Pickney directed this thing, and
Michael Pickney, yeah.
we so I was an executive producer alongside Colleen Selden, who was my distribution partner at the time, and Spike
Mm,
Lee. And so Spike Lee was an executive producer on this project, and it was like a fun horror movie that was like intertwined with hip hop, right? So,
mm,
and it was called You're Nobody Till Somebody Kills You, and we did our premiere at Willie Fest,
wow.
and and I remember we had after the screening at Willie Fest, we had a party after, and Greg Nice of Nice and Smooth
Yeah.
was like the our MC entertainment, and in
Wow.
that, I mean, in the movie, it was a fun horror movie, man. I mean, Big Daddy Kane, Dougie Fresh. It
Wow.
was like old school hip hop royalty in the movie, and it would all went down at Willie Fest.
So cool.
That was some good times.
Yeah, I know Michael. He's come to a few of my events before.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice. I haven't talked to him in forever. All right,
yeah.
you know what? And so that when I do reach out, I don't have to say, "Well, I should have reached out sooner." But listen, I'm going to reach out to him and just say, "What's up?" and be better at keeping them relationships.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, this was this was fun. I like I read your IMDb, and your IMDb is like I'm like, wow, you've done a lot of stuff, but more importantly, you're such a nice person,
Oh,
and
well, thank you, Dara.
I'm genuinely happy that you got to come on the podcast today. I've
Thanks
learned
for
a
having me.
great deal. You are welcome to come back anytime for anything or
Uh,
any
Darren, that is super cool of you to say. I would love to, man. So
when
thank you.
when Amy is, the exhibit and everything is happening. I'd
Mhm.
love to keep in touch and learn, if there's anything I can help with or
Love it.
do, or definitely want to check it out 100%.
That
So
sounds great, dude. So yes and yes, let's absolutely keep in touch. And yeah, man, let's talk again after this is